Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Everything Happens for a Reason podcast. So I have a new guest with me here today, Rory.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Who is actually coming on to talk about the transition from struggling with addiction in the past to essentially moving it to something where you're now supporting other people that struggle with that, yeah?
Yep.
Amazing. And would you like to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself, how you got to where you are today, I suppose?
Yeah, so I'm Rory Sloan, 24, originally from Belfast. I grew up all around East Belfast, struggled with addiction from the ages of 13 and my behaviour sort of all around that. But looking from on paper, I wouldn't be your typical person, to go down that route. I'm kind of from a good background, mum and dad still together, went to a good school. Played golf at a high level, played football at a decently high level. It wasn't mapped out for me,
yes.
I suppose. But I think that just shows you the power of addiction. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like. It can kind of affect anyone.
Absolutely. And like you said, because a lot of the time I feel like there's a stigma around addiction. Like if your parents or one of your parents struggled with it, then it's almost like you're bound to struggle with it too, but it doesn't come from that at all.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we also, I also know from speaking to, say, my girlfriend's parents who didn't really know much about addiction. Whenever you speak to people that don't really know a lot about it, they always presume an addict, someone lying in a what's that called, an alleyway.
Yeah.
Injecting themselves with something, that's homeless, but that's not the case at all. I think you'd be surprised how many people actually, we're all addicted to something.
Yeah.
I always say to people, put your phone away for a full day, and how many times do you think about it? How many times do you go to look for it? How many times do you reach for it? We're all addicted to something, and when you really dumb it down like that, it kind of helps remove that kind of stigma. It's just obviously, unfortunately, some people are addicted to substances that ruin lives, and can rip relationships apart.
100%. And where do you think it started for yourself?
Yeah, so it started for me, literally, that kind of transition, I think, from going from P7 to first year.
Okay.
So it was literally that young. And when I have worked with a lot of people as well, that age 14 seems to be like a key age of when people start experimenting or taking stuff or, anything like that there. It was to fit in, at the start. It was more, I went to school, it's more like, call it posh school, it's like, like that there. and I came from, Orangeville playing football and stuff, and you weren't allowed to play football when you walked in. I got shouted at for having my hair spiked up, in the first day, so I felt really uncomfortable. And all of a sudden, my friends then started to develop to be older people, and they were obviously already smoking weed was the first thing I did. So that was what I did. I met them after school, started smoking weed, just started off, as a once a week, kind of thing. But obviously it's expensive as well. So, and I wasn't given, people in the school were maybe given 30 quid a week pocket money, I was given a tenner a week. You can't really buy much weed with that.
Yeah.
So then that's how I came on to, used my head, which we learned is I have an entrepreneurial mind, but I just had the wrong product. So I would have got 7 grams, for example, and then I would have maybe sold them to my friends and then made profit, and that profit would have been mine for free that I was smoking. So then that's how you kind of start getting into that. And obviously then word spreads about and everyone's so he's the guy that does it, that kind of thing. And you never intended to go to that. I definitely didn't at the start.
Yeah, I think it sort of starts off like that. You're thinking like, oh, just a wee bit of cash to supply myself almost, that sort of way. And then when the word gets around as well, you would have seen the money coming in and oh, okay, I see where this is going.
The money was definitely an addiction side of it too.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. But yeah, I definitely think, I struggled a lot with, I've always, from a young age, I've had depression, I self-harmed at a very young age, anxiety was always through the roof. I'd undiagnosed ADHD for ages, so I was obviously, when you go into sort of classroom areas, especially at quite a strict school, I always felt like I didn't really fit in. And I think that's now going through therapy, looking back, obviously dealing with a lot of trauma before that I didn't even know I had. Which
you always find out and you're like, okay.
Which was crazy, but I think that was kind of my way of fitting in. And I was always seen as this wee idiot, that always ran about. And I don't know if I kind of liked it or if I was then smoking or taking drugs or substances because I don't actually like being seen like that, but that kind of helped me cope with that persona.
100%. I think a part of it could have been as well, if people were talking about it, you were you almost made it something that you associate yourself with, like a part of your personality.
Yeah.
And then obviously it became more and more repetitive over time.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of spiraled pretty quick. You know, that's what people say, weed's not a gateway drug. You know, I don't know anyone that started taking drugs and went straight into taking Ease, you know, or something. You know, everyone started smoking. And I made a PowerPoint for one of my talks the other day, and it was like 75% of people first take it just because to try it, and then 43% carry on to see how it feels because it makes you feel good.
Yes.
And I think that is that's the dangerous side of it, is because when you feel like the substance, drink as well, I believe if drink was made nowadays, it would be illegal. You know, it's only because it's gone on for so long. But you know, it makes you feel good, and it means whenever you're having a bad day, or especially when you're starting it so young, everything's stressful. Homework stressful. Things that aren't maybe that big in the grand scheme of life are stressful. And when you find something at such a young age that makes you feel good and feel better, you know, that's how you can become in an early addiction, or, you know, pre-addiction, you know, kind of thing. And then definitely, you know, obviously come downs and stuff like that, which no one's told about, no one's talked about. You feel crap for a week, and then you're like, oh, I feel really bad, let me just smoke or take more.
100%.
And then that's you stuck in that cycle. You actually never, like I would say from the ages of 14, now there was a year where I did stop before I got really bad.
We took a break.
We took a break. But, you know, I think that was definitely, you know, no one talked about it. And then obviously the weed then not strong enough. So then I became at Ease and MD were my thing.
Yes.
And I got so bad I was taking them in school to cope with periods because they were so boring. You know, I got there, I was just sitting with my headphones in.
It wasn't even something that was associated with like a party environment.
Yeah, definitely. It actually never even started in that environment, which I suppose was maybe, you know, I didn't start it at a party. Started it at someone's garage.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, I didn't take them I was actually really scared to take them out because of the way they made you look. So it took me ages before I took them actually on a night out. I would have been more of a drink on a night out, get wiped out after.
Yes, the house party after.
Yeah, you know, that thing when no one's looking.
Yeah.
You know.
I think what you said there is such a valid point though. It's like people are constantly chasing that dopamine.
Yeah.
And then like you said, the come down comes. And of course, what's going to make you feel better in that instance? And that comes down to anything, doesn't it? And it's so easy for that addiction to build up then because you're constantly chasing that high.
Yeah.
And then the massive low comes after that.
100%. Especially nowadays as well. Like, even when I look at my wee brother, he's 19 now. Yeah, 19. He would come through the whole sort of COVID growing up, you know, obviously, what was that, 5 years? He was 15 coming through COVID. All are on PlayStations, all are stuck inside. You know, when I grew up, I didn't get a PlayStation until I don't know what age. I was always running, kicking a football about or running around. So that gives you natural dopamine, where then people are now getting addicted to staying inside.
100%.
You know, like that. They're not getting out, which is why I promote physical fitness so much, especially with young people.
Yeah, and you were saying before we started the podcast that you're a PT as well then.
Yeah, so I qualified as a personal trainer in tech. So I did the whole probably from 13 to 16, you know, I was kind of just on drugs, drinking. I left school early, went to tech. My mum and dad wanted me to do something to go to uni because that's what everyone needs to do.
Yeah,
that's
what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do. I didn't go to the tech class once. Maybe went 10 times, you know, and then it got to the end. I just partied. I went to Thompson's in Belfast. Literally, I would have stayed at my mate on a Tuesday, and when my mum and dad were going to work, he stayed at mine on a Wednesday, and we just did that for the full year.
Yeah, just on rotation.
Mental. And so then I got to the end of the year, and they were like, "You have 24 assignments. You know, you need to hand in 2 days here." And I was like, I handed them in, you've lost them. Like, you know,
for fuck's sake, you were one of those.
yeah. But then I was like, right, I'm not going to get out of this here. So without telling my mum and dad, I paid for myself to do, I'd already started sort of training and stuff, you know.
Okay.
And within school, you know, they wouldn't let me go to the gym or play golf or do rugby or anything or football unless I did extra maths or English classes. So I'd already started doing, you know, the training and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I paid for my own personal training course. Then I told them, and they were raging. They were so angry. But I see now it's the best thing, probably the best choice I made.
Yeah.
So I did that. Fell in love with the gym. I'd left home by then. Had a bit of just whatever at home. Left home. Started personal training. I fell in love with bodybuilding, you know, which was my kind of thing. So okay. I was like, I'm going to do a bodybuilding show, you know. So I dieted down while PTing, helping more young people as well. You know, I actually noticed a few people come to me before I even knew really what mental health fully was.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely seen people coming to me that were quite like you could tell we're struggling, and that's where I was thriving. When I look back at it now, I didn't even know that that's why I was enjoying it, if that makes sense. But like,
100%.
when I look back at it now, that's why I think I kept it on. Died for the bodybuilding show, and if you don't know, bodybuilding is very intense. I got down to the last 4 weeks, and COVID cancelled it. Yeah, so literally,
I would be raging.
Literally getting into that stage. So I developed an eating disorder. I was raging. Obviously, at being 18 as well, I'd missed the 18th birthdays because I didn't want to go out and ruin my bodybuilding prep.
Yeah, 100%.
I got an eating disorder. I started drinking and I started sniffing cocaine to kind of stop eating. You know,
Diet and hacks 101. Please don't follow them.
Don't do that. But and that's where it kind of spiraled out of control. You know, I ended up getting in debt, started getting involved with the wrong people, and all of a sudden everyone around me was either selling drugs or doing drugs. And that was me. For the next few years, I actually ended up getting way deeper into that. You can actually put this on the podcast if you want, but I came out in the front of the newspaper. I got arrested with 120 grams worth of weed. And I owned my own sweet shop and stuff like that there. You know, I went really deep into it very quickly.
Okay.
So I ended up getting arrested just after my 21st birthday, and I went to McGabry. So I did. I was held in there on remand. Mental health was completely enjoyed it, but I didn't really speak to my mum and dad, you know, at that point. So that's what I was saying to people, you know, I always knew that was part of the job rule. You know, I said, you know, I didn't try and fight the police. I didn't try and kick off. When I got arrested, I was like, right, that's it.
Yeah, you knew it's going to come one day or another. Yeah,
it's going to come one day. And to be honest, anyone that gets involved in that, you know, it's prison or you die, you know, and that is the reality of it. You know, it's very hard to get out of it without any repercussions. So I think that was the best scenario. And I say now, you know, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
I love that. I really respect you saying that, because for most people, it would have been their breaking point.
Yeah.
Like, that would just been it for them. Do you know what I mean? They would have came out, kept doing the same cycle over and over again. Whereas for you, it was that turning point. Like,
yeah. Well, to be fair, when I said it's the best thing ever happened to me, but I only realised that maybe like on further down the line.
Yeah.
You know, when I remember going in, you know, it's literally the exact same as the movies. You know, you get in a bus, you know, you're handcuffed, you get lifted out, there's German chaps with machine guns walk you in, they ask you do you smoke, they give you the fags, and then they send you to the cell. And then that was it. I ended up getting death threats and stuff, you know, from our paramilitaries.
Yeah.
So I was kept, and I didn't really know what was going on, because in my head they were my mates. You know, so I was kind of thinking,
we were getting on outside. What's happening?
I was going, what's going on? And obviously, you know, you were just like, what the hell? But then my turning point for me really was so you get 3 chances to get bail.
Okay.
And obviously mine was quite a high risk. I was arrested by the paramilitary task force, so it wasn't just like a policeman's just pulled me over. Kind of thing. And so I'd applied for bail twice at this stage, and they were like, no chance, basically.
Okay.
And then the guard came in and said I was a Zoom call, and I was like, okay, this is my solicitor, which actually turned out I would have been sitting there for about 6 years, you know, which would have been, so you have to stay in there while the whole court case goes on, then you get charged and you have to do that on top of it.
Okay.
But it was my mum and dad. And I was like, you know, like, I wasn't expecting this, you know, at all.
Yeah.
You know, and they didn't shout at me. They didn't do anything. They were just like, what the hell? You know, that kind of thing. And they were like, we'll try and help you and get you bail. You know, you've kind of fucked up now. You know, you're doing your punishment, but you know, if you do go back to that life, this is where you belong, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of made my head worse, you know, at the start. You know, I was like, because I hadn't spoken to my mum and dad properly in ages, you know, kind of thing. And all of a sudden they're there supporting me at the worst time, and you're kind of going, I never ever expected this.
Yeah.
So they did get me bail. I got out on tag. I was on tag for about a year. They came up and moved to my nanny's house with me. I mean, I was suicidal. I was still addicted to drugs. Obviously, as soon as I got out, I was finding any way to get them, even though, because you were allowed out of the house for a certain period of time, so I was going and getting them. No one even really knew that, you know, to a certain extent. You know, I was trying therapy or counselling through the NHS, which was an absolute nightmare. I ended up hanging up on them a few times, and then you get into your head, if this professional can't help me, you know, I'm fucked, basically.
Yeah.
You know, like that. Taking antidepressants, which made me way worse. You know, I had, and then I was obviously I was also trying to manage everything else that was going on in my life. You know, it was just an absolute shit show.
And do you think you sort of returning back to that afterwards, was it more of like a coping mechanism?
Yeah, it's weird. I try not to really say this because it's not the right way to look at it. But at that time, I didn't really have a supportive circle around me that knew what I was going through that could help me. I didn't have the right coping mechanisms or toolkits that I was willing to get involved in. So I don't think I would have survived that without still drinking or taking drugs. Do you know what I mean? At that point in time, which is why I say to people now, it's so important that like to reach out and get help from rather a recovering addict or someone that actually knows what they're talking about, you know, that's lived it or been around it, or, you know, that's even not trained in it. You know, I believe lived experience is a massive...
Absolutely. Somebody who's never been through it cannot teach you how to get over it, you know, or like move forward with it, essentially.
100%.
Because like you said, you went to therapy on NHS.
Yeah.
If they're in the NHS, they're definitely not a recovering addict.
No,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't have that experience. So how can they help you and understand you and what you're going through and help you overcome that if they've never been in that position? They're just following textbook.
Yeah, and they just make you feel like a number.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, dealt with him, we're done kind of thing.
Or they're like, oh, you got 37 this week and you got 36 this week. Congratulations, you're a bit better.
Yeah.
Like, that's all they need to get paid. You know, and that's the thing where I actually then got referred to a charity called Alternatives, which is like a restorative justice charity.
Okay.
And they have a trauma therapist in there, Emmett, who now works alongside Resolute Minds. We're now very good friends, you know. And I went to see him in person. He is also a recovering addict. He's also got the lived experience, but he's also trained in trauma therapy.
Okay.
And within 2 sessions, my anxiety went from probably off the scale to like a 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Like to the point, like when I went into him, I couldn't even hold a conversation with anyone. You know, I was like this.
Yeah,
I couldn't speak. And that was completely life-changing for me. Now, did that. It took me ages to keep going with a lot to sort of process. And because I was going through the court case, we didn't want to deal with the actual drug dealing side of it because I need to still have that emotional attachment, so I feel bad for what I've done. So we were dealing with everything else, you know, while doing that.
Yeah.
So therapy was a long process for me, but life-changing, you know, whenever I found the right one.
Yeah.
And the right support system, I suppose.
100%. And are you still in therapy at the minute?
I still see Emmett, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something I believe, the way, that's what I tell my clients. So say you're spending £500 a week on drugs, you should take a percentage of that and invest it into your mental health whenever you start to get better.
Yes.
You know, in my opinion, no one's ever fixed. And as soon as you think you're fixed, like completely, like that's me, I'm saved kind of thing.
Something's going to happen.
Something's going to happen. That's when a relapse is around the corner. That's when it catches you off guard. So me personally, like I'm a coach and I invest in a coach because it keeps me accountable. It keeps me disciplined. Also means I don't have to really think about the diet. He can do all that for me and that kind of thing. But it keeps me, I know I train for my mental health, so it keeps me pushing as hard as I want to. It keeps me showing up every day, you know, stuff like that there. But then I also go and see Emmett. Anytime I need him, I'll book in for a session, you know. I maybe don't, you could say I don't book in every week now, but like I speak to him every week because we're now, you know, so in theory, I probably get like 5 therapy sessions a week. So, but I think that's why I don't even know if I mentioned, like obviously my company, Resolute Minds, you know, that helps people. I've now used my live experience to help especially young people is where I'm aiming at, with addiction, mental health, or just spreading awareness, you know, and education around it, because I don't think people understand how it's in your face so much nowadays. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, with regards to the company as well, how or what sort of made you start that up?
Yeah, so I started volunteering first for the charity Alternatives, and I really enjoyed it. You know, I was speaking to sort of young men's groups around the Shankill area. Some of them that I actually had sold to, which was a bit weird, you know, they'd reckon, you know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I got asked to apply to go to the One Young World, which is basically a conference where activists of under 30-year-olds come together, 197 different countries. It's a big thing. It was held in 2023 because of the Good Friday Agreement.
Okay.
It was their anniversary, so they had held it here. But I mean, like, it was in Canada last year, so it's all spread all across the world. And someone had said I should apply for it, so I applied for it, not thinking, you know, I was just like, may as well. And I actually got accepted to go to it. So I was at it, which is I think it was 3 or 4 days summit. We were going around with people talking about all sorts of world sort of issues going on. and they're all uni people, you know, or you've got degrees, and I'm walking around with a tag under my thing trying to hide it. Okay, you're like, going for sake. But I'm very open about it. You know, if anyone had asked me, I would have been like, you know, like
Look
that.
what I got.
Yeah, my ankle Rolex. But yeah, so I was at that, and then they asked me to talk at it. So I was in front of like 600 or 700 people in the Ulster Hall, and that was my first time sort of really vocalizing my story in front of a bigger crowd. They kind of were going to understand why I was doing it. And after it, the sort of response I got was unreal. They were saying we need young people to talk about this with the lived experience, because you can't beat that. You know, when I'm sitting there saying this actually happened to me, and I'm only a few years older than you, you know, or when I was your age 4 years ago, this happened to me. You know, it's not like I'm saying, oh, I watched this or learned about this.
100%. You can relate to people.
Yeah, you can relate to it as well. So that's when I started, my business mind started going, how can I make this into, because I developed a huge passion for it. I nearly became addicted to learning how people got addicted. You know, I was like researching it, you know, also if I got there, I wasn't just living off mine, I was learning about how you can help other people that maybe aren't the same as me. So yeah, that's how Resonate Mind started. Originally, it was just going to be conferences held in like vulnerable areas or where unis are, students can go to. And then someone said to me, you can't just help people for an hour, you know, and I'd be like, where you go, you know, kind of thing. So then I was like, well, what actually helped me that I can provide for other people? So that's when I turned it into an actual organization, and kind of got started to do workshops, public speaking, one-to-ones, obviously recovery and physical fitness in person and online. And then actually this week, haven't got an exact date yet, but we've created with Emmett a 30-day recovery program, which is the closest thing to a one-to-one you can get without spending a fortune. So it's a one-off payment and you have it for the rest of your life. Yeah. And you get physical fitness videos you can do in your house, therapeutic coping mechanisms that Emmett goes through, and then I get my lived experience, and then you get a journal as well.
Amazing.
You know, to help. So that kind of removes that barrier. You can, and no one's going to know you've done it. You can do it from your own house. You know, it's kind of removes that kind of stigma around it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that will work really, really well for people who aren't willing to like fully say or ask for help. Yeah. That they can sort of take their own steps.
They can start in their house, you know, they can start in their own comfort zone.
And build their own sort of esteem and confidence up with it, and then potentially go for the one-to-one.
And it says 30 days, but like in theory you could take 60 days. You know, we've split it like you get a video every 3 days, but if you really are taking it at your own pace, you can take it at whatever pace you want.
Yeah, of course.
You know, it's completely up to you. But yeah, so that's something I'm excited for, and I really hope it does make a difference, because they do it for businesses. Yeah. Like you can, like I seen the model for like business, but no one done it in recovery, and I was like, why? You know, why can you not do like, say like buying a one-off fitness program that you have?
Yeah, 100%.
You know, so it's like so yeah, that's exciting, but yeah.
Amazing. And I suppose with clients coming to you, do you find that they will usually reach out, or is it quite difficult almost for them to like accept that they need a little bit of help?
Yeah, so you kind of have a mix. Okay. So I do a lot of like TikTok, you know, and stuff, you know, trying to talk on TikTok, and that's where most of my clients have come from. But you do have people that know they've got an issue, but they're still at that bit that like, oh, I can do it myself. Yeah. You know, kind of thing, which no one can get through recovery yourself, because you do. So as I explained to some clients, there's a few clients that I've had, you know, they maybe relapsed a bit quicker, you know, kept relapsing, and it was because it got hard, you know, and they're like, oh, this is, and I was like, why do you think when we get sober we shout about it so much? Because it's friggin' awful. Yeah. You know, that first month is going to be the hardest month, if you're lucky, if it lasts only a month, you know, it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. You know, obviously you're coming off the stuff. Your cravings are at a high intensity, your low self-esteem, you've had to probably cut friends off, you know, that you 100%. Can't see. You know, even family, you might have cut family off, you know, stuff like that there. You know, it's going to be the hardest till you get past that stage. And then I would say you get into the honeymoon stage where you're like, I'm sober, you know, your life's good. And then that wears off and you realize life's still shit and you can't go back and cope with it. So yeah, that's why I do my program over 10 weeks. So I try and get them sober, whether it's a full month or 1 or 2 weeks within the first month. And then they get over their honeymoon stage, and then I'm still there for another few weeks to be like, yeah, well, this was always going to happen.
They need that little bit of maintenance.
Yeah, and that's where I get people into the gym. You know, you need to start making yourself feel good in natural, healthy ways.
100%. Absolutely. You need to be showing up for yourself in those situations and giving yourself other purpose as well. Yeah, definitely. And I think what you mentioned there about like cutting people off and cutting family off, I think coming from addiction, that's probably the biggest thing, because if that was your lifestyle beforehand, you would have been surrounded with people that are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Or like those party environments
100%.
or whatever. You have to go to the complete other end of the spectrum. So I can imagine it can feel super, super lonely for people.
Yeah, it was definitely, I say, especially for young people, I believe, because we think everyone's our friend that's around us. You know, we don't actually see who's got our best interests at heart. And that was definitely the hardest thing for me, was I had to, even some of my best friends now still take drugs. You know, so we have like sober days.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with that because I'm so busy all the time anyway. But also have some people that as soon as shit hit the fan for me, or as soon as I decided I need to get sober, I would have said I had 30 good friends. You know, I probably have 3.
Yeah.
Now, you know, that's just the way it is, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But at the very start, you know, that's the hardest thing to deal with.
Of course.
You know, because you're also trying to learn to be happy in your own company.
Yeah.
So you're always trying to find people to hang out with, do stuff to distract what you're going through. And yeah, no, that was definitely one of the hardest.
Yeah, and it makes sense completely, because like you said, like it would have been 30 of you and you thought they were all your friends, but really it was just acquaintances.
Substance in those bonded relationships.
Yeah. Literally though, you know, and whenever you strip back, but it's nice that you have those, even if it is those 3 friends, but they understand what you're doing and what you're going through, and that you're choosing to be sober, and there's no external pressure from that, you know.
And even though, like, I also say, you know, like some of my friends, some of them are still addicts, you know, and that's the most annoying thing, is being somewhere that's sober, because I'm like,
you're trying to help
my
them.
mistakes, you know, kind of thing, you know, like, don't go down, but because you know, addiction kills you, you know, so you may think, oh, I can do this for the next 10 years, but what if you don't get out of it? You know, what if you stay in it, you know, kind of thing. But then I also have other friends that can go out and take it on a Saturday, or drink, not even just drugs, can drink on a Saturday and not touch it again for 2 months. You know, and I do think that's fine.
Yeah, it's a healthy balance,
it's a healthy balance.
And I suppose, what advice would you give to somebody that is recovering at the minute, but maybe they do have a relapse? Because I can imagine people have a relapse and they're like, it's that all or nothing mentality in coaching. Like, you know, they're like, oh, well, I did it, so I might as well just keep going now.
Yeah. No, like, I relapsed many times in that year trying to get, and I think the most important thing is to get up the next day and talk to someone about it, you know, that knows what you're going through, you know, whether it's another recovering addict, a therapist, or just someone in your support circle. You know, I think the most people do is like, oh, I've done it now. They can't cope with doing it, so then they keep doing it. And that's probably the hardest thing to stop doing. But like, you need to like really nip it in the bud as quick as possible, because you can just spiral out. And if you've already done that period of sobriety, you can do it again, you know, and you learn from it. You sit back. Like, that's why I think it's so important to have maybe like a coach or a therapist that you can go back and go like, right, why did that happen? What were the triggering points? And learn from it, so you know how to avoid them or be aware of them. You know, it's all about learning, you know, and everyone's different. You know, I know some people that have been sober 10 years and relapsed. You know, but so it's not like it doesn't happen. And
of course.
Even for myself, you know, I've spoken about it on TikTok already anyway. But last week, last week, coming up to the Father's Day Sunday, I was getting cravings all week, and I was going, what the heck? I didn't notice it until the Wednesday. I was like, that's 3 days in a row. I've been like, I'd love to but I don't crave a drink. I crave getting fucked up.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so weird. Like, I was like, I'd love a few of my mates that I know wouldn't tell anyone to come and just get spangled in a room, not telling, you know, and I was like, this is the 3rd day, you know, what the hell's going on? And then I was thinking, is it because some of my clients I used to party with, and we were talking about good times? So I was thinking, is that it? And then I got to the Thursday or Friday, and I went into the Russells near me, and I noticed Captain Morgan's was on offer, and that would have been my drink, and I'd be like, I'd never noticed that before, but it's all about, because I'm aware of it now, 100%. You know, which is the good thing, which took me ages to get to. So then I was like, what the hell's going on? And I went back, started doing my sort of, stripped it right back, started doing a bit of my coping mechanisms and toolkits, what I do all the time anyway, but you do kind of let some of them go. So I stripped it right back to the basics, and then something happened on the Sunday, which kind of just tipped me over the edge, and I was like, fuck this, you know, this has just been, I don't know what's happening, I don't know what's going on, I just found myself in this really dark hole. But luckily my girlfriend was with me. Okay. And she was like, do you want to come up to my house, or do you want to stay here? And in that moment in time was kind of like, I think the real point, because if I had stayed at home, I couldn't have guaranteed anyone I would have stayed sober. Yes. You know, so I didn't. I went to her house, but it took me about half an hour to make that decision. But I think that's what I say is like, what's the word? Taking yourself away from people is the biggest killer or biggest cause of relapse, you know, because you need to be surround people. So I 100%. Went up to hers, None of them knew what was going on, so no one was questioning me about it. No one was talking about it, and it took my mind off it. And it passes. It does pass.
Yeah.
You know, it does pass. So after a few hours, you know, it had passed. And then from Monday onwards, I sat with Emmett. I'd spoken to Emmett, and I was like, I need to reevaluate why that was happening, because obviously it wasn't just them conversations.
Yeah.
I'm actually stripped back that I was living with that, like, if I can't control it, fuck it. You know, that's nothing to do. I can't do anything about it. Where I think that was me actually ignoring it. I wasn't actually processing what was going on. Like, I didn't have a very good last 2 months, so it was kind of like there was just wee things kept going wrong. And instead of me actually dealing with it or processing it, or, you know, I was just like, I can't control it. So I think that was it. It was a build up.
Yeah.
You know, so now I'm aware of that. So now I know, like, even if I can't take control of it, I need to sit and process it.
100%. And I think it's going to be one of those things that you're always going to struggle with.
Yeah, no,
you know?
definitely. It never goes away.
Yeah, of course. But like you said, awareness is number one.
Yeah.
Like for anything, if somebody binge eats, that's one thing I always say, like, what was the trigger? You're more aware every time you binge eat now, or you're looking to binge eat.
Yeah.
Whereas beforehand, it probably would have been something that you felt like was out of your own control, and it was just part of your
100%.
day-to-day routine almost.
Yeah, I suppose binge eating is kind of the same as like an addiction. You know,
Yeah,
you're craving
it
like,
is
the
an
sugar.
addiction,
Yeah, you're
of course.
craving the sugars. You're craving, you know, and yeah, I think that would be.
And a lot of it's linked to emotional too.
Yeah.
So like if you're having a shitty week, it's like, oh, what's going to bring this dopamine up? And you know, what's your biggest addiction? People might be alcohol, other people might be eating absolutely everything in the cupboards. Like, it always comes down to that.
Well, actually, yeah, I was going to say, I've actually just completed a bodybuilding show. There,
Okay, congrats.
Yeah, 6 weeks ago. So it was actually a full circle moment, because obviously I was the tick off, and I was like, I need to do one properly. I did one during addiction too, but I couldn't even do it properly because my coach knew I was still on all this stuff, so it would have been dangerous to take it. But I still stood on stage, you know, like that kind of thing. But I wanted to do one properly, so I did NABA and I did PCA there 6 weeks ago. And that diet was the closest thing to like addiction recovery that I had felt in ages. You know, I was really got to the point one stage where I was weighing out galaxy cubes to see if this was actually gonna like hurt my diet, and I had to catch myself on. I was like, this isn't going to make anything better.
Yeah,
this is going to
literally.
make it worse. But that's where my headspace was at. Like, there was nights where I was crying because I was like, I just want a Domino's. I don't want to do this anymore. You know, it took me way into a dark hole, but I learned a lot from it.
100%.
You know, and the reason I did it was to show that people in recovery aren't weak. You know, you can push yourself, even though I don't recommend people doing that because it's actually not healthy. You know, but I did it and I got past it. But when I started to be able to eat again, you know, and I went strap, instead I ignored for a few days you need to reverse that. Yeah,
but that's the thing, because I did one back in November and I was the same. See, that first week, I was just eating everything.
Eating. And but then like,
you feel like crap afterwards.
Yeah, I know. And like my face and all like started filling, because the water started filling up, my face started getting sore, and you put all this weight on so quick.
Yeah.
And that is something that I'm definitely struggling with now. I'm like, I feel like shit. You know,
100%.
And I'm sitting like, I've stripped it right back. I'm fully sticking to a diet again. I'm doing 45 minutes cardio a day just to try and get the water flowing in a better places. But for them first few weeks, you know, it definitely is, and that was something I needed to be aware of. I said the whole time, because I got that eating, I binged that after the one that got cancelled. So I needed to be aware of it, and I was aware of it, but I still didn't have full control over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was the same. Like, I was debating it for years and years, and then my relationship with food got to a really, really good place. So I was like, that's why I did it last year.
Yeah.
And I genuinely thought the reverse was going to be a breeze, because I had such a good relationship with food. And then see when you come off stage and you're like, I can eat that if I want to. I can have this. Your brain just switches off.
I know.
And like, I literally binged for the first couple of weeks, and yeah, your relationship with food and everything does get messed up. And I think that's natural just because of how restrictive it is. Like you said, it's not healthy.
And I think it is like, it's definitely a mindset as well. You know, I think you're sitting going, in that last sort of week, you're thinking, this is over, I can eat what I want. This is over, I can eat what I want.
It's all in your head, though, it is.
Yeah. And I was just, it was mental. But you nearly couldn't eat. Like, she was raging. We went up to, obviously, Londonderry Dairy, whatever you call it, up in, to do PCA.
Yes.
And we'd step back to the hotel, we're going to stay the extra night, go out for food and all. I think I went out and then slept for like 10 hours.
Carb coma, 100%.
And then she was like, what are you, like, we were to go out for dinner and all. I was like, I can't move, you know, and then woke up at like 11. I was like, I'll go get a kebab or something.
Didn't care anymore.
No, I was just like, but yeah, the bodybuilding, it was extremely intense, but don't know if I'd rushed it another one.
Yeah.
I still train like a bodybuilder, you know, I'm still going to stay in that kind of routine, just try and grow a bit, but I'm not putting a time limit or time goal
I
for when I want to
think
do another.
like your reasons behind doing it though were very valid.
Yeah.
Like you did it to prove to yourself. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't about like, oh, I'm gonna be jacked kind of thing. Like I know that's a part of it, of course. But it was more so to like, okay, no, I can do this. Like I would have done it beforehand and I can do it now after all the shit I've been through, essentially.
And it sounds really psychotic, but like I love pushing my body to like limits.
Oh,
you know,
I
or
get
like
that completely.
I love pushing. Like I was thinking when this is over, I actually tried to get a High Rocks ticket, but I was from like 23,000th in the queue or something.
Oh.
And I was like, couldn't get one.
Maybe that's a sign. Take a break.
And then I wanted to do, so I was thinking if I do the High Rocks, my fitness would be up, so I'd love to do a marathon, you know, kind of thing. So like my whole thing to help grow the business as well is I want to push myself in like positive ways to a certain degree, you know, but also do the extreme ways to show that like, and I love testing my mind, I love feeling that like, this is so hard, but I know I can get through it because you got through. Addiction is probably the hardest thing anyone can get through.
100%. And I think you're putting your purpose into different addictions that are actually going to benefit you.
Yeah.
You know, they're a lot more positive. You're going to be healthier. You're going to be fitter. You're going to actually feel better from it.
Yeah.
And I think it's like a part of your personality too, to put your emphasis into something.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like everyone says you never do anything half-hearted, do you?
Yeah.
Whether it's really good or whether it's really bad. You know, I always have to take everything to the extreme, and sometimes that pisses me off. I'm like, can you just be normal for a minute? But at the same time, the other end of the spectrum, you know, it means when I do something, like I will fully go into it.
Yeah,
you know,
you put your heart in it.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, I suppose, is there any advice that you would give to somebody who is recovering at the minute, or even if they're not at that stage yet, but it's something that's at the back of their mind?
Yeah. So my one best tip I would give to someone that is in recovery is just focus on the 24-hour period. You know, when you're going to get bad days, obviously, we all get bad days, but someone in recovery, they are a bit worse because you're so used to coping with them. What I would say is just focus on the 24 hours. You know, all you need to do is make it till you fall asleep. Tomorrow's a new day. You know, get up, go back to your routine, use your coping mechanisms. If you don't have coping mechanisms, reach out. But yeah, that's what I would say. You know, go back, strip it right back. You know, for me, I probably let go of journaling there for a while. I'm now stripping it right back to go back to my journaling.
Yeah.
You know, I have a routine I do every morning, but journaling I let go a wee bit. So I'm gonna go back to writing my thoughts down in the morning, try and see if that'll help me process it out. But again, just 24 hours. It takes a lot of stress off it. I promise no one that I'll be sober forever, but I promise you I'll be sober today. And that's
no future pacing.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So like you know what I say, anxiety lives in the future, depression lives in the past, and sober lives in the now, and that's just the best way to look at it. For someone that is looking to get into recovery, if you're having doubts, as in like, do I need help? Do I not need help? You need help.
That's a sign, isn't it?
That's a big sign. And what I would do is just reach out. You know, there's loads of people on TikTok. Reach out to me. You know, someone that's in recovery, and just be like, "This is how I'm feeling." Someone in recovery is never going to judge you for asking the question.
Yeah.
So that's where my first point would be, and then just get help. You know, you can't do it alone, especially at the very start. You know, reach out to someone. There's charities around. You know that you can. You know, you can't. If you don't want to pay for it, you know, you can try and get on the referral list and stuff like that. There is help out there, but I do think the way to learn the most is from someone that's lived it.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
100%. And I know obviously we spoke about this and you're like, I wish I never did that, but are you happy that you did have that previous life experience to get you to where you are now?
Yeah, I believe everything happens for a reason. You fed that. Yeah, but I do genuinely. You know, I've been through a lot in my life. There's not very many people who can sit in front of me and say something that I haven't witnessed or been through or experienced. And I believe that whether you believe in God or whatever puts the toughest people through these things to help other people not go through them. So I wish I'd never done it. I wish I'd just lived a normal life, you know.
Yeah.
But obviously I'm not built for that.
I like the extremes.
Yeah, but of course, like I wouldn't be here helping, supporting. Like I've had over 25 people. I've got sober myself within 10 weeks. You know, I wouldn't be doing this right now. I wouldn't be helping other people's lives if I hadn't have been through what I've been through. So I do believe everything happens for a reason, and I think it's the best way to look at it. I look at when something goes wrong, like, how can you turn it into a positive?
110%.
If I have on my leg, do not let your past define the power of your future.
Yeah.
And that's a quote I live by, and I tell everyone to live by. We all make mistakes, but how can you turn that into a positive? How can you learn from it and grow as a person instead of holding yourself back? Because if you let it weigh yourself or stay on top of you, you're just going to get stuck.
110%, and that's exactly what I was going to say. A lot of people, when they're going through a rough time, they will naturally, all of us being the victim mentality initially, why
100%.
me, why is this happening kind of thing. But you can only let that go on for so long before you change the mindset, essentially, and then you'll end up coming out the other end of it. And like for yourself, you essentially found that purpose with what you want to do, and now you're helping other people from your own experience.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't necessarily something you wanted to do.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I think it's just crazy how life works out. Like I always say to people, one of the craziest things is the person I am now would help the person I was 4 years ago.
Love that.
And the person I was 4 years ago would go nowhere near the person I am now.
Yeah.
And
Couldn't imagine it.
The fact, and not even 4 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm 2 years sober, but say like 3 years ago from when I got arrested. The fact that that's the same person in such a short period of time just speaks volumes on how your mindset, can change. And I just wanted to say, obviously, on what you were saying there, about taking action. Everyone goes into the victim mindset, and I had a metaphor the other day that I made up, so I want to say it. If you're really struggling and you're feeling stuck, what best bit of advice I would give is write out, everything that's in your head, and then split it into two columns. What can I take action on, and what can I not take action on?
Yeah.
Take action on them first few things as quick as possible. And then the metaphor was, right, if I get 2 10 kg plates and I put them on top of your head, but you're able to lift one off, all of a sudden that weight becomes lighter. So it helps with anxiety, it helps with panic attacks, it helps if you can remove the stuff you can control.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that weight on top of you feels a lot lighter.
That's
and
good.
It's a lot easier.
I like it.
I made that up on the spot the other day to a client, and I was like, "Oh my days, I'm so freaking good at this."
Quote.
Yeah, I literally. But I was like, but it is true. If you think about it, all people say the weight's on your shoulders.
Yeah.
If you can remove half that weight, it's going to make life a lot easier.
Yeah, 100%. It's essentially just breaking down what can you control right now and what you can't, and
exactly
take action.
And you'll
on
feel
what
better for taking action on some of it anyway.
Yeah.
And it'll make you stop thinking about the other stuff as much anyway.
100%. Well, this was a very insightful conversation. So thank you so much for coming on. And I think
problem.
a lot
Thanks
of
for having
people, even if they don't struggle with addiction, I think a lot of people will walk away from it reconsidering their weekend plans potentially.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you so much, everybody, for listening.